Lee rushed to an immigration detention center to fight for people who just got here while Black Americans in her district are still fighting for basic dignity. This is exactly why we walked away. Let me tell you about the most insulting political theater I've witnessed lately. Representative Summer Lee, a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, made headlines rushing to an immigration detention center, demanding entry, fighting tooth and nail for the rights of people who literally just arrived in this country. Meanwhile, Black Americans in her own district are dealing with crumbling schools, food deserts, police brutality, and economic abandonment that's been going on for decades. And this woman has the audacity to wonder why Black voters are walking away from the Democratic Party. See, Summer Lee represents everything that's wrong with Black Democratic leadership today. She's more concerned with performing progressive politics for white liberal approval than she is with addressing the specific needs of Black Americans who put her in office. She's turned the Congressional Black Caucus into the Congressional Everybody But Black Caucus, and we're supposed to just smile and accept it. But Black America is done accepting political malpractice wrapped in social justice rhetoric. Let's talk about what really happened when Summer Lee tried to storm that detention center. This wasn't about genuine advocacy. This was about creating viral moments for her progressive brand. She knew she wouldn't be let in. She knew it would generate media coverage. She knew it would position her as a fierce fighter for immigrant rights. What she didn't consider was how it would look to Black constituents watching her fight harder for strangers than she's ever fought for them. The psychological dynamics here are fascinating and deeply revealing. Summer Lee, like many Black Democrats, has internalized the belief that fighting for Black-specific issues makes you narrow, while fighting for everyone else's issues makes you universal. She's been programmed to believe that Black advocacy is selfish, but immigrant advocacy is noble. This is colonized thinking dressed up in progressive language. The Democratic Party has successfully convinced Black politicians that our issues are too specific, too divisive, too problematic to center in their political work. They've been taught to lead with everyone else's pain while treating Black pain as a footnote. They've learned to speak passionately about immigrant families being separated while staying silent about Black families being destroyed by mass incarceration policies they helped create. And the most infuriating part, they do this while calling themselves members of the Congressional Black Caucus, as if that membership gives them credibility to ignore Black issues while championing everyone else's causes. Let's be brutally honest about what the Democratic Party's immigration obsession really represents. It's a deliberate strategy to replace Black political leverage with a more compliant voting bloc. Think about it from a business perspective. Black voters have become too demanding, too sophisticated, too willing to withhold support when Democrats fail to deliver. Immigrants, especially undocumented ones, represent a more manageable political constituency, grateful for any protection, unlikely to make demands, dependent on Democratic goodwill for their very survival. This isn't compassion, it's political calculation. The Democratic Party looked at Black voter independence and decided they needed insurance. They needed a group that would never walk away, never make demands, never threaten to withhold support. Immigrants, particularly those whose legal status depends on Democratic policies, fit that bill perfectly. But here's what they didn't count on: Black Americans figuring out the game. When we see Summer Lee racing to detention centers while ignoring the conditions in Black neighborhoods, we understand what's happening. When we see Democratic politicians giving passionate speeches about immigrant rights while staying silent about reparations, we see the priority list. When we watch them fight for pathway to citizenship programs while voting for crime bills that devastate Black communities, we recognize the betrayal. This is why so many Black voters sat out the 2024 election. Not because we suddenly love Republicans, but because we refuse to support politicians who treat us like political afterthoughts while performing activism for everyone else. Summer Lee's detention center stunt is the perfect metaphor for modern Black Democratic politics. Lots of energy spent fighting for people who can't vote for you, while the people who can vote for you watch from the sidelines wondering when their turn will come. The strategic implications of this immigration obsession are staggering. Every dollar spent on immigrant advocacy, every hour invested in immigration reform, every political capital burned on detention center protests is resources that could have been used to address Black American concerns. It's a zero-sum game, and Black Americans keep losing. Look at the issues that actually impact Black communities: police accountability, educational equity, economic development, healthcare access, criminal justice reform. When was the last time you saw Summer Lee stage a dramatic protest about any of those issues? When did she last demand entry to a failing school in a black neighborhood? When did she rush to a hospital that's closing in a black community? The silence is deafening. But mention immigration, and suddenly she's a fierce advocate ready to fight the system. Mention immigrant children, and she's bringing cameras and demanding justice. The energy is there, it's just being directed away from the people who elected her. This isn't accidental. The Democratic Party has created a hierarchy of oppression where immigrant struggles are treated as more urgent, more sympathetic, more worthy of immediate action than black struggles. They've convinced black politicians that advocating for immigrants makes them more progressive, more intersectional, more morally pure than advocating for their actual constituents. It's psychological manipulation on a massive scale. The beauty of the 2024 Black Voter Walkaway is that it exposed this dynamic in real time. When black voters stopped showing up automatically, Democratic politicians suddenly had to confront the fact that their immigration-first strategy wasn't delivering black votes. They had to face the reality that performing for white progressives doesn't translate to black political support. Summer Lee and politicians like her are experiencing cognitive dissonance right now. They built their entire political identity around being progressive champions, but they're discovering that black voters don't consider them champions at all. They thought their immigrant advocacy would be seen as evidence of their commitment to justice, but black voters see it as evidence of their misplaced priorities. The Congressional Black Caucus has become a joke because of members like Summer Lee. What's the point of having a caucus dedicated to black issues if the members spend their time advocating for everyone except black people? What's the purpose of black representation if those representatives are more concerned with impressing white progressives than serving black constituents? The CBC used to mean something. It used to be a vehicle for advancing black political interests, for holding America accountable to its promises of equality and justice. Now it's just another Democratic Party subsidiary, parroting whatever talking points leadership gives them while black America continues to suffer. And the most insulting part is how they justify it. They'll tell you that immigration is a black issue because some immigrants are black. They'll argue that fighting for immigrant rights is fighting for human rights, which benefits everyone. They'll claim that coalition building requires supporting other marginalized communities. But that's not how coalition building actually works. Real coalitions are based on mutual support and reciprocal advocacy. You fight for my issues, I fight for yours. What we have instead is black politicians fighting for immigrant issues, while immigrant advocates stay silent on black issues. We have black politicians spending political capital on detention centers, while immigrant organizations remain neutral on reparations. That's not coalition building, that's exploitation. The psychological impact on black communities has been profound. We're watching our elected representatives treat us like we're invisible while performing grand gestures for people who can't even vote. We're seeing our issues pushed to the back burner while immigration dominates Democratic political discourse. We're witnessing our politicians chase progressive approval while our communities continue to struggle with the same problems they promised to address. This creates a sense of political homelessness that goes beyond party affiliation. It's not just that Democrats are failing us, it's that our own supposed representatives are actively working against our interests while pretending to fight for justice. The immigration obsession also reveals something deeper about how the Democratic Party views black voters. They see us as a captive audience that will support anything as long as it's positioned as progressive. They assume our votes are automatic because where else are we going to go? They take our loyalty for granted while courting other communities with actual policy proposals and concrete commitments. That assumption just became expensive. When black voters walked away in 2024, we sent a clear message. We sent a clear message. We're not captive, we're not automatic, and we're not going to support politicians who treat us like political furniture while rolling out red carpets for everyone else. Summer Lee's detention center theater is emblematic of a broader disease in black Democratic politics. These politicians have lost touch with their actual constituents while chasing validation from white progressive organizations. They've internalized the belief that Black-specific advocacy is somehow less noble than universal advocacy, even though universal advocacy never seems to include addressing Black-specific problems. The business analogy here is perfect. Imagine a company that ignored its most loyal customers while bending over backwards to attract new ones. Imagine a business that took its core demographic for granted while spending all its marketing budget on people who might never buy their product. That company would fail, and that's exactly what's happening to the Democratic Party. Black voters are the Democratic Party's most loyal customers, but we're being treated like we're lucky to be included while they chase immigrant votes that may or may not materialize. It's political malpractice on a scale that would be laughable if it weren't so damaging to Black communities. The psychological manipulation is especially insidious because it uses our own values against us. Black Americans have always been committed to justice and equality. We understand oppression intimately. We have natural empathy for other marginalized communities. Democratic politicians exploit this empathy by convincing us that fighting for immigrants is fighting for ourselves. But empathy without reciprocity is just exploitation with better marketing. Where are the immigrant organizations fighting for reparations? Where are the immigration advocates speaking out about police brutality in Black communities? Where are the detention center protesters when Black families are being evicted or Black schools are being closed? The silence reveals the truth. This has never been about mutual support or shared struggle. It's been about using Black political energy to advance non-Black political interests while keeping Black issues on the back burner indefinitely. Summer Lee's grandstanding at that detention center was the perfect encapsulation of this dynamic. She was performing for cameras, creating content for social media, generating headlines that would establish her progressive credentials. But none of that performance translates to better outcomes for Black Americans in her district. This is why the 2024 walkaway was so psychologically satisfying for many Black voters. We finally stopped enabling politicians who were using our votes to advance everyone else's agenda. We stopped accepting the argument that our issues were too narrow or too specific to deserve focused attention. We stopped letting them guilt trip us into supporting immigration policies while our own communities remained neglected. The Democratic Party's immigration obsession isn't going to end anytime soon because it serves too many of their strategic interests. It allows them to appear progressive without addressing systemic racism. It gives them a path to political power that doesn't depend on Black voter satisfaction. It creates emotional content that energizes white liberal donors. But Black America has figured out the game, and we're no longer playing by their rules. Summer Lee can keep rushing to detention centers, keep performing for progressive audiences, keep prioritizing immigrant issues over Black concerns, but she can't count on Black voters to keep supporting politicians who treat us like political afterthoughts. The 2024 election taught us that our votes have power, but only when we're willing to withhold them. Summer Lee and politicians like her are learning that lesson the hard way. Black America deserves representatives who fight as hard for us as Summer Lee fights for people who just got here. Until we get those representatives, we'll keep walking away from politicians who take our votes while giving their energy to everyone else.
It's easier to be a dad. It's easier to tell your kids character matters. It matters. Telling the truth matters. Being a good person matters. Back for no reason. This is vindication for a lot of people who have really suffered.